The vault door slammed shut, and inside the Bank of England, clerks stood frozen, staring at ledgers that no longer balanced. Gold was leaving the country faster than anyone dared say out loud. Outside, London still looked like the center of the world. But behind closed doors, Britain's greatest power was bleeding away, ounce by ounce, shipment by shipment. What almost no one realized in that moment was that this was the beginning of the end. The pound sterling, the money that once ruled global trade, was quietly losing its grip. And on the other side of the Atlantic, another currency was waiting. For more than a century, the pound had been more than money. It was trust. It was empire. It was the invisible force behind ships crossing oceans and contracts signed in distant ports. Merchants in India priced goods in pounds. Oil deals in the Middle East were settled in pounds. Insurance in Hong Kong, loans in South America, trade in Africa, all tied back to London. If the world had a financial heartbeat, it pulsed through the city of London. Bankers spoke with confidence bordering on arrogance. Britain didn't just trade with the world, it financed it. British banks lent money to governments, businesses, and entire regions. The pound was as good as gold, not because of slogans, but because Britain controlled the system that made trade possible. Shipping lanes, underwritten by British insurance firms. Ports protected by the Royal Navy, legal systems modeled after British law. The pound sat at the center of it all, unquestioned. Then came the war. In 1914, Europe marched toward disaster and Britain marched with it. The war was supposed to be short. It wasn't. Week after week, month after month, Britain poured money into the fight. Weapons, soldiers, supplies, gold reserves that had taken generations to build began to vanish. The government needed cash fast and pride was pushed aside. Across the ocean, American financiers listened carefully. Britain, the world's banker, was now asking for loans. At first it didn't feel dangerous. Britain had survived wars before. The empire still stretched across the globe. The pound still dominated trade, but something subtle had changed. For the first time in modern history, Britain owed more money than it was owed. By the time the war ended, the illusion of permanence was cracked. Britain had won the war, but it had lost something far more important: financial independence. Gold that once anchored the pound now sat in vaults in New York. Debt that once flowed outward now flowed inward. The pound survived, but it was wounded. In London, officials spoke carefully. Publicly, everything was fine. Privately, the conversations were tense. How do you maintain a global currency when your reserves are thin and your debts are heavy? How do you project confidence when the numbers say otherwise? Meanwhile, the United States was transforming. American factories roared to life during the war, supplying weapons, food, and materials. When Europe burned, America produced. When Europe borrowed, America lent. By the early 1920s, the United States wasn't just rich. It was essential. Gold flowed steadily into American vaults. The dollar began appearing in international contracts, not because the U.S. demanded it, but because traders trusted it. In boardrooms and banks around the world, quiet conversations started happening. If Britain can't pay, who can? The Americans always have cash. The dollar is convenient. No one announced a shift. No headlines declared a new financial order. But habits were changing, and habits shape history. Britain tried to hold the line. It clung to the gold standard, hoping stability would restore confidence. But the world had changed. Maintaining the old system required sacrifices the country could barely afford. Jobs were lost, wages fell, social unrest grew. Every effort to prop up the pound drained the economy further. Then came the second blow. The Great Depression shattered global trade. Countries pulled inward. Confidence evaporated. Britain, exhausted and financially stretched, finally did the unthinkable. It abandoned the gold standard. The decision was practical, but symbolic. The pound was no longer anchored the way it once was, the world noticed. Across the Atlantic, the dollar stood firm. By the time World War II erupted, the balance of power was already shifting. Britain entered the war, knowing the cost would be enormous. Once again, it turned to the United States for help. The conversations this time were heavier. Britain needed weapons, food, fuel. The US agreed, but the terms were clear. Payment would come later. Gold assets, influence. Britain had no choice. As the war dragged on, Europe was devastated. Cities reduced to rubble. Industries destroyed. Britain survived, but barely. Its economy was hollowed out, its empire strained, its finances exhausted. America emerged transformed. Its cities stood untouched, its factories were stronger than ever. And most critically, it held the majority of the world's gold. Not by conquest, but by circumstance. In 1944, representatives from dozens of nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The war wasn't even over yet, but everyone understood the urgency. The world needed a new financial system, something stable, something trusted. The room was filled with tension. British delegates arrived with history on their side, but little leverage. American delegates arrived with gold, factories, and economic muscle. The proposal was simple, almost blunt. The dollar would be tied to gold. Other currencies would be tied to the dollar. The system would revolve around the United States. Some hesitated. Some protested quietly. But alternatives were scarce. Europe was broken. Britain was indebted. America was the only country strong enough to anchor the system. This was the moment the handoff became official. The pound was no longer the world's currency. The dollar was. Britain signed the agreement knowing exactly what it meant. The empire that once set the rules was now playing by them. The pound would continue to exist, but its global dominance was over. After the war, Britain faced a painful reality: needed American loans to rebuild. Those loans came with conditions. Devaluations followed. Each one chipped away at what remained of the pound's prestige. There was no single day when the pound collapsed. No dramatic announcement. No financial explosion. Just a slow, steady fading. Banks stopped holding pounds as reserves. Trade contracts defaulted to dollars. Oil was priced in dollars. Debt was issued in dollars. The world adjusted, and soon it forgot there had ever been another option. The dollar, once a rising challenger, became the default language of global trade. And with that dominance came power. The United States could borrow cheaply. It could run deficits others couldn't. It could influence global markets without firing a shot. This wasn't just economics. It was geopolitical leverage, built quietly, sustained daily. Britain watched it happen from the sidelines. Former colonies drifted away. Financial influence moved across the Atlantic. London remained important, but no longer central. The pound became a national currency, not a global one. History moved on. Decades passed, and the dollar's position hardened. Crises came and went. Oil shocks, financial crashes, wars. Each time, the dollar bent, but didn't break. Each time, money flowed toward it, not away. And yet beneath the surface, the same patterns began to whisper again. Debt rising, confidence questioned, rivals emerging. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes. The story of the pound isn't about failure. It's about limits. It's about what happens when a nation carries more responsibility than its economy can support. The pound didn't lose its crown because Britain stopped mattering. It lost it because the world changed faster than Britain could adapt. The dollar replaced the pound not with force, but with gravity. It was stronger when strength mattered most. It was stable when stability was rare. And once the world leaned on it, letting go became almost impossible. Today, people argue about the future of money, digital currencies, new reserve contenders, shifting alliances. But the past offers a clear lesson. Reserve currencies don't die in explosions. They fade through decisions, debts, and dependencies. The vault doors don't slam shut anymore. They simply open elsewhere. If you've made it this far, take a second to like this video. It helps more than you think. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, stories about power, history, and the forces shaping the world around us. And comment below. Do you think the dollar will one day face the same fate as the pound? Or is this time different? It's because one day someone may stand in a quiet room, staring at numbers that don't add up, realizing that another era is ending. And just like before, the world will move on, barely noticing the moment everything changed.